She stood in the middle of his boardroom, 7 months pregnant, hands shaking, chin raised, and said the words that were supposed to end everything. "This baby doesn't need you." The room went silent. 20 executives froze, and Kang Joon-ho, the most feared CEO in Seoul, didn't flinch. He just looked at her, really looked at her, and said quietly, like a promise wrapped in iron, "But I need both of you." Nobody moved, nobody breathed, and that was the moment Amara Osei realized she had made a terrible mistake thinking she could walk away from this man. Let me take you back to where it started, because this story doesn't begin in a boardroom. It begins in a hospital hallway at 2 in the morning, with a woman sitting on the floor because her legs gave out. Amara was 29 years old, a registered nurse working double shifts at Seoul General Hospital to pay off the debt her late mother had left behind. She was the kind of woman who held other people together for a living, the kind who wiped strangers' tears and held strangers' hands and smiled through it all. But that night, on the cold tile floor of a hallway she'd walked 100 times, she sat with her knees pulled to her chest and cried in a way she hadn't allowed herself to cry in years. She'd just been told she was pregnant, 8 weeks along, alone in South Korea, no family within 4,000 miles. The father? A man she'd spent 3 weeks with 6 months ago. A man who had looked at her like she was the only light in a room full of shadows. A man who had kissed her forehead and told her she was remarkable, and then disappeared without a trace when his family called him home. She hadn't even known his last name was Kang. She hadn't known he was that Kang. She found out by accident, the way painful things always find you. A patient left a business magazine on his bedside table, Korean Business Monthly. There was a face on the cover that made her drop her clipboard, sharp jawline, eyes like still water over deep stone. The kind of face that looked expensive even in newsprint. Kang Joon-ho, 34, CEO of KH Group, Korea's most powerful unmarried executive. She stood there in that hospital room for a full minute, just staring. The patient said, "Nurse, are you okay?" She wasn't. She was pregnant with that man's child, and he hadn't called once. Here's what Amara told herself. He doesn't need to know. I'll handle this. I always handle things. She was good at surviving. She'd been doing it her whole life, raised in Accra by a single mother who worked herself into an early grave. Scholarships and student loans and sheer stubbornness had gotten her here. She didn't need a man who couldn't even leave his number. So she made a decision. She would have this baby. She would raise this baby. And Kang Joon-ho would never have to be inconvenienced by either of them. It was a clean plan. It lasted 4 months. The night everything cracked open, she was finishing a night shift when 2 men in black suits appeared at the hospital entrance. One of them held a photograph, her photograph, and asked the receptionist if she worked there. Amara saw them from across the hall, and something cold moved through her. She slipped out through the staff exit, took a different route home, told herself she was being paranoid. But the next morning, there was a black car parked outside her apartment building. And the morning after that. And on the 3rd morning, she opened her front door, and Kang Joon-ho was standing in her hallway. He looked different from the magazine, less polished, like he hadn't slept. He was wearing a dark coat, and he was holding 2 coffees, one regular, one herbal tea. And when she opened the door, he looked at her stomach first, just for a second. Then he looked at her face. "You moved apartments," he said. "You had people looking for me," she said. "Yes." "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. Not evasive, just careful, like a man who had rehearsed 100 things to say and had decided at the last moment to say the truth instead. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you. And then I found out and He stopped. "I should have called. I know that. I'm sorry." She stared at him. "You're sorry. I know it's not enough. It's not even close." He nodded like he deserved that. He held out the herbal tea. "This is for you. No caffeine. I read that it's better during—" "Stop." Her voice broke slightly. "Don't do that. Don't come here being thoughtful. It's harder when you're thoughtful. If this is already getting to you, just wait, because what happens next changes everything." She let him in, not because she trusted him, because she was tired and her feet hurt, and the tea smelled like honey, and she was, despite everything, still human. He sat on her small couch in her small apartment, and he looked around at the life she'd built. The hand-stitched curtains from a market in Insadong, the photo of her mother on the windowsill, the baby name book she'd forgotten to hide. And he didn't say anything, condescending or pitying. He just sat there, present. "Tell me what you need," he said. "I need you to not make promises you won't keep." "Okay. That means I need you to go." He looked at her. "Is that really what you need? Or is that what you think you should want?" She didn't answer, because she didn't have one. He came back the next day, and the day after, not with grand gestures, no flowers, no lawyers, no contracts, just him, sometimes with food, sometimes just to sit in the chair by her window while she put her feet up on the couch. He'd answer emails on his phone, and she'd read her nursing journals, and sometimes an hour would pass in complete silence, and it wouldn't feel uncomfortable. It felt somehow like rest. "You're not what I expected," she told him one evening. "What did you expect?" "Someone who'd show up with a contract, custody terms, a team of lawyers." "I have lawyers," he said simply. "I didn't bring them because this isn't a legal problem. You're not a problem." She looked at him. "What am I?" He held her gaze. "Someone I should have fought harder to find 6 months ago." She looked away first, because if she didn't, she was going to cry, and she refused to give him that yet. The thing about Kang Joon-ho was this. He was a man who controlled everything. Billion-dollar negotiations, government contracts, rooms full of powerful people who were afraid of him. But in Amara's apartment, with her soft music playing and her quiet dignity filling every corner, he seemed to understand that control wasn't the currency here. So he offered the only thing he had left: honesty. He told her about the night he disappeared, how his father had collapsed, a stroke, and he'd been pulled onto a private plane before he'd even had time to think. How he'd lost her number in the chaos of those weeks. How he'd looked for her, or told himself he had, and stopped when the looking got inconvenient. "And that's the part that shames me," he said. "It got inconvenient and I let it go. That's not who I want to be." "But it's who you were," she said. "Yes." That honesty cost him something. She could see it, and it bought him more than he knew. But here's where the story turns. Amara had been so focused on Joon-ho that she hadn't noticed someone else noticing her. His name was Lim Sung-jae, and he wasn't just anyone. He was the vice chairman of KH Group, the man who had been running things during Joon-ho's absence, the man who had spent 3 years positioning himself to take over the company if Joon-ho ever had a reason to step back. And now there was a reason. A very visible, very pregnant reason. Sung-jae had done his research. He knew exactly who Amara was, knew she was a foreign national, knew she was financially vulnerable, knew she was the kind of woman who, if pressured the right way, might disappear. He started small. Amara's hospital contract suddenly came under administrative review. Her visa status was flagged for reasons her immigration lawyer called unusual. And one evening, walking home from the pharmacy, a man she didn't recognize fell into step beside her and said, quietly and pleasantly, "Nurse Osi, the vice chairman would like you to consider your options carefully. Korea is a complicated place for someone in your position." She stopped walking. The man smiled. The baby would have a much better life in Ghana. She turned and walked the other direction without a word, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking the entire way home. She didn't tell Joon-ho. Not that night. She told herself it was because she didn't want to seem like she needed rescuing. But the truth was she didn't know whose side of this story she was in yet. The woman being protected, or the woman being used as a chess piece. What if Joon-ho knew? What if this was all part of something she couldn't see? She lay awake that night with her hand on her stomach, feeling the baby move, small, insistent kicks like Morse code, and she talked to her the way she always did when the world got heavy. "I don't know who to trust, little one," she whispered, "but I know I trust you. And I know I'm not going anywhere." The next morning, she called a friend. Bisi, a fellow Nigerian nurse who'd been in Seoul for 6 years, and knew the city's underbelly the way only a survivor could. BC listened to everything without interrupting. Then she said, Amara, you need to look up Lim Sung-jae, and then you need to look up what happened to the last person who got in his way. Amara looked it up. A former KH board member, pushed out through a series of manufactured scandals. His family publicly humiliated. It happened 3 years ago, and the man had never recovered. Her phone rang, Joon-ho's name on the screen. She let it ring twice. Then she answered. Are you free tonight? He asked. His voice was different. Something coiled in it. Why? I need to tell you something. About my company. About someone in my company. A pause. About why I think you might be in danger. She closed her eyes. Say that last part again. You might be in danger, Amara, and it's because of me. And I need you to know that I will not let anything happen to you or our child. She didn't say anything. Are you there? He asked. I'm here, she whispered. I'm listening. He came to her apartment that evening and he sat across from her at her small kitchen table, and he laid it out, all of it. Sung-jae's maneuvering, the board politics, the fact that a CEO having an illegitimate child with a foreign woman was exactly the kind of destabilizing story his enemy needed. He told her about the visa flagging, which he'd just discovered. He told her about the administrative review at the hospital, which he'd already had his legal team dismantle. He told her everything, and then he said, I want you to move into my house. She looked at him. It's not about control, he said quickly. There's security there, full time. I can't monitor this building. I can't keep you safe here, and He stopped, set his jaw. I need you somewhere I can protect you. You need, she said. Yes, I need. Is that so wrong? She studied his face. There was no performance in it, no calculation. Just a man sitting across a table from a woman he'd failed before, asking for the chance not to fail her again. It's not wrong, she said quietly, but it scares me. Why? Because I've been doing this alone for 7 months, and I got good at it. And if I let you in, really in, and you leave again, her voice caught, she steadied it. I won't recover from that, not this time, not with her. Her? He said softly. She realized she'd slipped. She looked down. I found out last week. The silence that followed was the most delicate thing she'd ever felt. When she looked up, his eyes were bright. A daughter, he said. A daughter. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers, not gripping, just resting, warm and still. I'm not going anywhere, he said. Not this time. Not ever again. Stay with me, because what happens next is the moment that broke me to write. She moved in 3 days later, 1 suitcase, her mother's photo, the baby name book. His house was enormous and quiet, full of clean lines and expensive silence. It should have felt cold. Somehow it didn't, not after the first night, when he walked past her room at midnight, saw her light on, and knocked. Can't sleep? He asked. The baby thinks midnight is playtime. He leaned against the doorframe. Can I feel? She looked at him for a moment. Then she took his hand and pressed it to her side, where the baby was kicking with focused determination. He went very still. Then he made a sound, low, almost inaudible, the sound of a man feeling something crack open in his chest that had been sealed shut for a very long time. She's strong, he said. She's stubborn, Amara said. She gets it honestly. He looked up. From you. From both of us, probably. He smiled, a real one, unguarded, and she realized she hadn't seen that before. The real one. It changed his whole face. It changed something in her, too. The next 3 weeks were, and she would hate herself for how much she meant this, the softest weeks of her life. He drove her to her prenatal appointments himself, sitting in waiting rooms full of couple-filled chairs without any visible discomfort. He learned, quietly, without making a production of it, which foods made her nauseous and which made her feel better. He put a second armchair in his study so she could sit near him in the evenings, without it having to mean anything more than proximity. He didn't push. He didn't perform. He just showed up, and she watched him. The way he treated his staff, firm but decent. The way he spoke to his younger sister on the phone, patient, almost gentle. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't watching, like she was something worth guarding. But Seung-jae wasn't done. 3 weeks after she moved in, a story appeared in a popular Korean tabloid. KHCEO's secret foreign mistress, a calculated pregnancy trap? The article had photos, Amara at the hospital, Amara entering Joon-ho's building, and a source who claimed she'd deliberately gotten pregnant to access the Kang family fortune. It was vicious, precise, designed to humiliate. She read it on her phone in the kitchen at 6 in the morning and sat there in the early silence, feeling each word land like a stone. Joon-ho found her there 20 minutes later. He read her face before he saw her phone. He sat down across from her. "I saw it," he said. "Of course you did. It's lies. I know that. You know that." She looked at him. But does the rest of the world? His jaw was tight. "I'm going to handle Seung-jae." "How?" "The right way. With evidence. With the board. Through the proper channels." "And how long does that take?" "Long enough that I need you to not run." He said it simply, directly. Whatever you're thinking right now, whatever part of you wants to pack that suitcase and disappear because it would be cleaner, I'm asking you not to. She looked at him for a long time. "Why?" she asked. Not challenging, actually asking. "Tell me why it's worth it." "Because I love you." He said it like it surprised him too, like the words had bypassed every careful filter he had and arrived in the room before he'd approved them. He blinked. I know the timing is. Don't take it back," she said quietly. He went still. "I'm not asking you to prove it," she continued. "I'm not asking for anything. I just don't take it back." "I won't," he said. "I meant it." What happened next moved fast. Seung-jae escalated. He approached 2 board members with a proposal to invoke a morality clause in Joon-ho's contract. Unprecedented, barely applicable, but enough to trigger a formal review. He leaked private financial information to a competing newspaper. He hired a private investigator to dig into Amara's past, looking for anything. A disciplinary record, unpaid debt, anything to make the gold digger narrative stick. He found nothing. Because there was nothing. Amara Osei had spent her life being impeccably, exhaustingly clean, because women like her couldn't afford to be otherwise. What Seung-jae didn't know was that Joon-ho had been building his own case, quietly, methodically. 3 years of Seung-jae's financial maneuvering had left fingerprints, shell companies, redirected contracts, misreported board figures, and Joon-ho's team had spent 3 weeks compiling it into something airtight. The confrontation happened at a full emergency board meeting that Seung-jae himself had called. The room was full, and Amara was there. She hadn't planned to be, but Joon-ho had asked her, and she had come, belly and all, because she was not the kind of woman who hid. That was when Seung-jae made his final move. He stood at the head of the table, gestured at Amara, and said with perfect boardroom control, "The question we have to ask ourselves is whether we trust the judgment of a man who is being manipulated by a foreign woman who is using a child as leverage." Enough. Joon-ho's voice cut across the room like a blade. He stood, and something shifted in the air. The particular electricity of a man who has been patiently building to this exact moment. "We're not discussing Amara," he said. "We're discussing you and what you've been doing to this company for 3 years." He nodded to his lawyer, who opened a folder and began distributing documents around the table. "I have every transaction, every rewrote contract, every fabricated report. Sit down, Seung-jae. Your lawyers are already outside." The room went absolutely still. Seung-jae's face went white, then red, then the particular gray of a man whose plan is collapsing in real time. He looked at Amara, like this was somehow her fault. She met his eyes without flinching. And that was when Joon-ho moved. Not dramatically, not aggressively, just with the quiet deliberateness of a man reclaiming something, and stood between them, facing her, his back to the room. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly, just for her. She nodded. "Do you want to sit?" No, she said. I want to stay standing. He almost smiled. Of course you do. Seung-jae was removed from the board that afternoon. By evening, his lawyers were in talks with prosecutors. By nightfall, the company's official statement had been released, and notably it mentioned Amara by name, not as a controversy, as the partner of the CEO and as someone who had demonstrated exceptional grace under malicious and targeted harassment. That last part wasn't written by the PR team. Joon-ho had written it himself. She found out when BC sent her a screenshot with 17 exclamation points. She walked into his study with her phone and held up the screen. You wrote this? He looked up from his desk. Is it accurate? Joon-ho. Is it accurate? She exhaled. Yes. Then yes. I wrote it. She stood there in the doorway for a moment, in her too big cardigan and her swollen feet, exhausted from a day that had nearly broken her, and she looked at this man who had fought for her in the most public arena he had. Come here, she said. He came. She didn't say anything else. She just pressed her forehead against his chest and let him wrap his arms around her, and for a long moment, they stood in his quiet study with the city humming far below and his hand moving in slow circles on her back. Thank you, she said into his shirt. You never have to thank me for that. I know. I'm doing it anyway. She went into labor on a Tuesday, 3 weeks early, fast and sudden, the way her daughter had apparently decided to do everything. He drove like a man trying very hard not to break every traffic law in Seoul. He held her hand in the hospital elevator, and she squeezed it so hard she heard him pull a sharp breath. Sorry, she gasped. Don't apologize, he said through his teeth. Squeeze harder if you need to. She did. He didn't make a sound. The labor was 8 hours, hard hours, the kind that strip everything down to nothing but survival and breath and the next moment. He was there for all of it, not performing, not narrating, not trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. Just there, steady, a hand to hold, a voice saying, You're doing it, she's almost here. And the steadiness in his voice was the most valuable thing anyone had ever given her. When the baby arrived, when the cry came, sudden and furious and absolutely certain of itself, something happened to Kang Joon-ho that no boardroom had ever done to him. He wept, quietly, completely, his face turned toward the wall, shoulders shaking, this giant, careful man undone by 8 pounds of new life. Amara watched him from the bed, exhausted beyond words, and felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled for 30 years. Come, she said. He turned, eyes red. Making no attempt to hide it, the nurse placed the baby in his arms, and he held her the way men hold fragile things when they realize for the first time what fragile truly means. Like she was the most important thing he'd ever been trusted with. She has your nose, he said. She has your chin, Amara said. She's perfect. She's ours. The word landed between them. Neither of them had said it before. Ours. This small, impossible word that meant they had chosen each other, past all the pain and distance and fear and public battlefields. He looked up from the baby to Amara, and his face was so open it was almost hard to look at. I meant what I said, he told her, in the board meeting. Before any of that. When I told you, I know, she said. I need you to know it wasn't just the moment. It wasn't the drama or the Joon-ho. She held out her hand. I know. He came and sat beside her, baby between them, and she leaned her head against his shoulder, and he pressed his lips to her hair, and the room was very quiet. They named her Ji-ya, a name they made together. The Ji from the Korean Ji, meaning wisdom, and Ya from the Ghanaian name given to girls born on Thursday. She was born on a Thursday. She came into the world as both things at once, and she would grow up knowing that belonging to 2 worlds didn't mean being divided. It meant being doubled. 6 months later, Amara went back to work. Not because she had to. Joon-ho had made it clear she never had to worry about money again. But because she was a nurse. Because people needed her. Because that was who she was, and she wasn't willing to put that down just because her life had gotten bigger. He dropped her off on her first day back, sat in the car outside the hospital entrance. Ji-ya was in the back seat, strapped into her car seat, already staring around with her mother's focused intensity. "You don't have to watch until I go in," Amara said. "I want to." She got out, walked toward the entrance, paused and turned back. He was watching. Of course he was. She smiled, real and unguarded and a little tired and completely happy. He smiled back. That evening, she found a note on the kitchen counter, handwritten in his careful English that still sometimes reached for formality. "I used to think strength meant needing nothing. You taught me it means choosing something, even when it's terrifying. Thank you for choosing to stay. I will spend a long time being worthy of it." Jay. She read it twice. Then she folded it and put it in the baby name book, next to the photo of her mother, in the place where she kept the things she wanted to carry forward. She had once sat on a hospital floor at 2 a.m. and cried because she was alone. She wasn't alone anymore. Not because someone had rescued her. She was too complete a person for that to be the story. But because someone had looked at her, really looked, and decided that she was worth the fight. And she had decided the same about him. That's not a fairy tale. That's something harder and better than a fairy tale. That's two people, broken in different ways, choosing to be each other's reason to be whole. Ji-ya is 2 years old now. She walks like she owns every room she enters and says Yama and Mama interchangeably depending on her mood. She has her father's stillness and her mother's fire, and she will, without question, one day terrify the world in the most wonderful way. And sometimes on quiet evenings, when the apartment is warm and the city hums below and Joon-ho is on the floor letting his daughter climb on his back like he's furniture, Amara watches them and feels something she spent so long not believing she deserved. Peace. Real, solid, earned peace.